Hello, America, and hello, nuclear aficionados around the world. Welcome to nuclear.com Daily. This is Monday, December 30th, 2013. I'm Steve Schulin of nuclear.com, and it's a pleasure and an honor to be part of your day. Those of you listening in later via podcast or on YouTube, please know that you're welcome, wanted, and encouraged to come join in every Monday through Friday, starting at 12:05 p.m. Eastern Time. And you can join in just like dialing into a conference call. The phone number is 724-444-7444. You'll be asked for a call ID. That's 95348#. So come one, come all of goodwill to nuclear.com Daily. Let us reason together. Well, let's take a look at the newspaper front pages and one other item that didn't make the front pages, but I'll tell you what, it was a beaut of an article. We'll start off with the top story out of the Carlsbad, New Mexico paper, The Current Argus, and this has to do with new build nuclear in New Mexico. The title doesn't tell you. It's called Bat Brigade Will Visit the Capital. Carlsbad business and community leaders plan to share viewpoints with state leaders in Santa Fe. But it ends here on the front page with it talking about, Carlsbad city leaders favor eventually building a small module nuclear reactor as a fix. Economic fix, but must first work toward garnering state and federal support because of the many regulations. Quote, every day it moves a little closer, said Jack Volpato, Eddy County Commission chairman, about the odds that southeastern New Mexico gets a nuclear reactor. Did you hear that? Every day it moves a little closer. The odds of getting a nuclear reactor in southeastern New Mexico. He continues, it takes energy to pump oil out of the ground, and we need more. Nuclear jobs are high-paying jobs. It makes sense to keep something down here so we have a little nuclear corridor. And of course, they already host the waste isolation pilot project there in Carlsbad. Next. A story that's been making the newspaper front pages here for the last week about the William States Lee plant. The Herald Journal out of Spartanburg, South Carolina. Nuclear plant clears hurdle. Board looks at environmental impact in Cherokee County and supports issuing license and construction. And when they talk about board in the headline, they mean the Nuclear Regulatory Commission staff, which has recommended that the license application be granted for the William States Lee nuclear station, units 1 and 2. Actually, that's the William States Lee the third. William States Lee was a Duke Power executive. Palo Verde in the news. In the Daily Times, out of Farmington, New Mexico, on the front page, down towards the bottom. It's actually about Public Service of New Mexico and closing down a pair of coal plants. And the article mentions, to recover the lost energy, the company filed with the state's Public Regulation Commission for approval to add 134 megawatts from the Palo Verde Nuclear Generation Station, Unit 3. So Palo Verde is getting another customer. That's a lot of megawatts. Out of Massachusetts, nuclear power makes the top story, spanning the top of the front page in the Patriot Ledger. States critical on nukes. Coakley and 3 other attorneys general voiced concern to federal agency about spent fuel storage. By Chris Burrell of the Patriot Ledger. Dateline Plymouth. Attorneys general from 4 states, including Massachusetts, have sharply questioned assurances by the NRC that the storage of spent nuclear fuel in America is safe. The question of how the U.S. should store its nuclear waste is looming larger now that Washington has abandoned plans to store the spent nuclear fuel at Yucca Mountain. Quote, Massachusetts has a strong interest and concern regarding storage of spent nuclear fuel at the Plymouth nuclear power plant. State Attorney General Martha Coakley wrote in a 143-page document submitted to the NRC. Coakley argued that when the federal agency first licensed the 685-megawatt nuclear plant for operation in 1972, spent nuclear fuel was only supposed to be stored there temporarily and then transported off-site. 4 decades later, the spent fuel continues to accumulate on-site at Pilgrim, posing a risk of catastrophic fire and other adverse environmental impacts, she wrote. Coakley and attorneys general from Connecticut, New York, and Vermont said the Nuclear Regulatory Commission has failed to address the environmental impact of nuclear waste storage in the face of reactor shutdowns, natural disasters such as earthquakes and floods, and after owners close down the power plants and leave waste to sit there indefinitely. Quote, this proposed rule again fails to address secure alternatives or solutions, said Gillian Fenimore, a spokeswoman for Coakley. The NRC estimates that more than 70,000 metric tons of spent nuclear fuel has accumulated into the U.S., with about 3/4 of it still stored and cooled in 40-foot deep pools at nuclear... Same story made the front page of another Massachusetts paper, the Enterprise, and they titled it down here at the bottom, Attorney General blasts nuclear waste at Pilgrim. They got a nice picture of the spent fuel pool there at Indian Point. Anyway, the subhead here in the Enterprise, that's out of Brockton, is Pilgrim has more than 500 metric tons of spent fuel stored in pools. Then they have a poll highlighted on the front page. They point folks to their website, enterprisenews.com. And the poll question is, should the federal government resume efforts to build a permanent nuclear waste repository at Yucca Mountain or some other location? Good poll. That was in Saturday's paper. I don't know if they still have the poll active, but their URL there is enterprisenews.com. ENTERPRISE news.com. Let's see, this wasn't on the front page, but the Guardian newspaper it used to be out of Manchester. Toshiba to buy a majority stake in UK nuclear consortium. And that was on Saturday. Japanese group Toshiba has confirmed that it is in the final stages of securing a majority stake in a British nuclear power consortium, bringing a further boost to the UK's ambitious nuclear program. Toshiba's chief executive Tanaka said an agreement to take a controlling shareholding in the NuGen consortium could be in place as early as January. NuGen is a joint venture between Spanish power company Iberdrola and French utility firm GDF Suez. And the consortium is developing a plant at Sellafield in Cumbria, where the owners plan to build 3.6 gigawatts of nuclear capacity on a disused reactor site. Confirming that Toshiba will also buy part of GDF Suez's 50% stake when it acquires Iberdrola's 50% shareholding, Tanaka said, "We want a majority to move forward, so we would want to take some of GDF's share, but have them remain as an operator. He added that securing a majority holding in the NuGen consortium would guarantee a $14 billion U.S. deal for Toshiba's Westinghouse unit to supply 3 reactors for the project. Toshiba is keen to kickstart an ambitious reactor building program that stalled after countries around the world froze nuclear expansion plans and tightened regulations in the wake of Fukushima. Its domestic rival, Hitachi, has bought the Horizon project, which intends to build 2 nuclear power stations, one in Angsley and one in Gloucester. Britain is one of the few countries pressing ahead with nuclear plans. The government's determination to make nuclear a central part of its energy strategy was confirmed 2 months ago when ministers approved a deal with France's EDF Energy to build the $16 billion Hinkley Point nuclear plant. Iberdrola, which is selling assets to reduce debt, said this week that it has agreed to sell its 50% in NuGen to Toshiba for £85 million, subject to final approvals, terms, and conditions. Tanaka said a majority stake was necessary to make progress on the project, where delays have frustrated the UK government. A controlling stake would allow Westinghouse, 87% owned by Toshiba, to supply 3 of its AP1000 reactors for the site. After building the reactors, Toshiba would reduce its stake. Quote, "We are thinking about an exit, but we haven't decided anything yet," he said. "We will reduce our majority stake over time. We are a plant provider, not a nuclear power provider." Interesting. So Toshiba buying into the consortium so that its 87% owned Westinghouse team will have AP1000 sold to it. All right, the story that didn't make the front pages, but that I was gushing about earlier, is an opinion piece by the Guardian's environmental reporter, George Monbiot. Monbiot has made a lot of waves around the world amongst environmentalists because he has really said, look, we need nuclear power. Anyway, his op-ed piece that I saw Saturday, Nuclear Scare Stories, a Gift to Truly Lethal Coal Industry. Subhead, "The Black Rock is a much nastier power source than the one we have chosen to fear in a deadly form of displacement activity." It's a humdinger of an op-ed piece. Fact after fact after fact, and it echoes the conclusions that I've been voicing since before Monbiot came out of the closet, so to speak, environmental wise, and saying we need to build more coal plants. Here's how it starts. "Most of the afflictions wrongly attributed to nuclear power can rightly be attributed to coal. I was struck by this thought when I saw the graphics published by Greenpeace recently showing the premature deaths caused by coal plants in China. The research it commissioned suggests that 250,000 deaths a year could be avoided if coal power there were shut down." Yes, 250,000 deaths a year. Were Greenpeace to plot the impacts of nuclear power on the same scale, the vast red splodges depicting the air pollution catastrophe suffered by several Chinese cities would be replaced by dots invisible to the naked eye. This is not to suggest that there are no impacts, but they are tiny by comparison. The World Health Organization's analysis of the Fukushima disaster concludes that for the general population inside and outside of Japan, no observable increases in cancer rates above baseline rates are anticipated. Only the most contaminated parts of Fukushima Prefecture are exposed to any significant threat. A slight increase in the chances of developing cancer, that is the significant threat that he refers to. A slight increase in the chances of developing cancer Even the majority of the emergency workers have no higher cancer risk than that of the general population. And this, remember, was caused by an unprecedented disaster. But the deaths in China from coal plant emissions are caused by business as usual. The tiny risk that is imposed by nuclear power has both obscured and invoked the far greater risk that is imposed by coal. Scare stories about nuclear power are a gift to the coal industry, and where they are taken seriously by politicians, as they have been in Japan, and therefore cause a switch from nuclear to coal power, they kill people. Since the tsunami in 2011, the internet has been awash with ever more lurid claims about Fukushima. Millions have read reports claiming that children on the western seaboard of the U.S. are dying as a result of radiation released by the damaged plant. It does not seem to matter how often and effectively the stories are debunked. They keep on coming. But children in the U.S. really are dying as a result of pollution from coal plants, and we hear almost nothing about it. Plenty of reports also propose that the water on the Pacific coast of North America is now dangerous to swimmers and the fish there are too radioactive to eat. Again, it is not true, except in the immediate vicinity of the plant. Any extra radiation to which fish in the Pacific are exposed is minute by comparison to the concentration in their tissues of polonium-210, which occurs naturally in seawater. There are, however, genuine dangers associated with another toxic contaminant found in fish, mercury. What is the primary source of mercury pollution? Yes, coal burning. In October, for the first time, World Health Organization officially listed both gaseous outdoor pollution and airborne particulates as carcinogenic to humans. Exposure levels, it notes, are rising sharply in some parts of the world. In 2010, an estimated 223,000 deaths from lung cancer were caused by air pollution. But these cancers, though wildly outstripping those correctly attributed to man-made radiation, are just a small part of the pollution problem. Far greater numbers are afflicted by other diseases, including asthma, bronchitis, emphysema, heart disease, hypertension, strokes, low birth weight, preterm delivery, preeclampsia, and through heavy metal exposure in the womb, impaired brain function. 300 micrograms of fine particulates per cubic meter of air is classified as severe pollution, the point at which children and elderly people should not leave their homes. As Greenpeace points out, in Shanghai a fortnight ago and in Harbin in October, concentrations of particulates exceeded not just 300 micrograms of fine particulates per cubic meter of air, but 500 micrograms. By far the greatest source of these particles is coal burning. In total, air pollution in northern China, according to a study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, the air pollution in northern China has cut average life expectancy by 5.5 years. We have exported much of our pollution and its associated deaths, but the residue in our own countries is still severe. A study by the Clean Air Task Force suggests that coal power in the U.S. causes 13,200 premature deaths a year. In Europe, according to the Health and Environment Alliance, the figure is 18,200 premature deaths a year. A study cited by the Alliance suggested that around 200,000 children born in Europe each year have been exposed to critical levels of methyl mercury in the womb. It estimates the health costs inflicted by coal burning at between 15 billion euros and 42 billion euros. Do you still reckon coal is cheap? You're picturing filthy plants in Poland and Romania, aren't you? But among the most polluting power stations in Europe, Longanet in Scotland is ranked 11th, and Drax in England is ranked 7th. Week before last, the House of Lords failed to pass an amendment that would have forced a gradual shutdown of the United Kingdom's coal-burning power plants. They remain exempted from the emission standards that other power stations have to meet. While nuclear power is faltering, coal is booming. Almost 1,200 new coal plants are being developed worldwide. Many will use coal exported from the U.S. and from Australia. The exports are now a massive source of income for these supposedly greening economies. By 2030, China is expected to be importing almost 5 times as much coal as it does today. The International Energy Agency estimates that the global use of coal will increase by 65% by 2035. Even before you consider climate change, this is a disaster. You do not have to be an enthusiast for atomic energy to see that it scarcely features as a health risk beside its rival. I wonder whether the nuclear panic may be a way of not seeing displacement is something we all do, fixing on something small to avoid engaging with something big. Coal, on which industrialism was built, and which over the past 200 years has come to seem central to our identity, is an industry much bigger and nastier and more embedded than the one we have chosen to fear. I don't believe our choice is accidental. So Monbiot saying nuclear power gets a bad rap, that we could save many, many lives a year, hundreds of thousands in China alone, tens of thousands in Europe, tens of thousands in the United States, not to mention elsewhere, if we would substitute for coal burning. Let's see, moving to front page from today out of Texas, the Amarillo Globe News features a story on the Pantex plant titled Pantex Plant High Explosives Processing Facility or Pressing Facility. NNSA says project improves safety. You know, the Pantex plant is where nuclear weapons are refurbished, manufactured, and part of that manufacturing involves high explosives. Part of the refurbishment involves high explosives. And that's part of what they do there at the Pantex plant outside of Amarillo. Washington Times mentions nuclear power icebreakers in a story today. They title it, Old U.S. Rivals China and Russia Step Up Challenges to Obama's Pivot. And one of the examples they give is Russia increasing the construction of nuclear-powered icebreakers. And they're doing it to try and dominate the Arctic. Oak Ridge News on Saturday. Oak Ridge Associated Universities vying for new contract role in workers program up for bid. This is talking about the nuclear worker compensation program. Oak Ridge does things like when a nuclear worker submits a claim about an illness, they work up a dosimetry profile, a lifetime dose profile on the individual to come up with the probability of causation related to their occupational exposure to radiation and beryllium and probably other things as well. A bunch of stories in Iran or about Iran today. Jerusalem Post in today's paper. Links the unpleasantness in Lebanon, or unpleasantness from Lebanon. Headline, attack from Lebanon is a double war crime, says Netanyahu. He says Hezbollah stations missiles in homes, endangering civilians on both sides. 5 Katyusha rockets fired at Israel. IDF responds with artillery fire. So yes, Israel says we can tell where the rockets are coming from, and yes, we will take them out. Hezbollah putting the rockets in homes are to blame for the homes that we damage. Now, let's see, out of Kuwait, also in today's paper, Saudis strengthen ties elsewhere after U.S. snub Saudis to give $3 billion to Lebanese army. And down at the bottom, an update on centrifuges in Iran. Let's see if you can see that. Not so clearly. A short article. Iran keeping new centrifuges offline. We saw reports last week about, even though Iran is said to be freezing their enrichment program and actually throttling it back, we see reports that they are still working on new generation centrifuges. But this story says, well, they're not using them. They're developing new centrifuges, but they're not using them. Are you kidding me? Does anybody take Iran seriously when they talk about freezing? Jerusalem Post yesterday. Good headline. In technical talks with Iran, the devil is in the details. Negotiations resume in Geneva tomorrow with final status nuclear deal not yet on agenda. Dateline New York. A third round of technical talks will begin on Monday between Iran and world powers still struggling over how to implement an interim deal they reached last month intended to arrest the Islamic Republic's nuclear program. These quiet conferences are a result of hard negotiations in Geneva conducted during autumn. Their completion is a requirement before even harder discussions begin between Iran and the P5+1 over a comprehensive agreement to the nuclear dispute. The clock on the 6-month deadline does not begin ticking until implementation, which cannot happen until the technical talks are done. The deal allows for an extension of the deadline up to a year from implementation should all parties agree to do so. And on Saturday, the Asian Age reports on the centrifuge story. Iran is making new centrifuges. Dateline Tehran. Iran's nuclear chief said the country is building a new generation of centrifuges for uranium enrichment, but that they need further tests before they can be mass produced. Oh, so 2 days ago, they needed further tests before they could be mass produced. And today, we see the headlines saying, oh, don't worry, Iran's not using their new centrifuges yet. Saturday in The Guardian, not on the front page, centrifuges work goes on after nuclear deal, a longer AP story. Lockport Union Sun puts it on their front page. They're out of Lockport, New York. Iran is taking steps to improve its ability to speed up uranium enrichment that could delay implementation of a nuclear deal with the 6 world powers because Tehran's moves are opposed by the U.S. and its allies. The Roswell Daily Record is the AP story, and here's how they title it. Iran talks hit bump over enrichment. And out of Iran, Dateline Tehran, this is in the Kuwaiti newspaper, the Arab Times. Their headline, official calls for direct talks with U.S. That's an Iranian official. Top foreign advisor to Iran's supreme leader on Friday called for separate talks directly with the U.S. amid the multilateral negotiations over Iran's nuclear program. The remarks Friday by Ali Akbar Velayati, Velayati, signaled a high-level endorsement of the policies of President Rouhani, who has been sharply criticized by hardliners over the landmark nuclear deal. Same stories highlighted on the front page of the Minneapolis Star Tribune. South Korea, this isn't on the front page, but it was a story that caught my eye. South Korea warns of merciless response to North's provocations. They're losing patience down in South Korea. And finally, on the front pages, the Topeka Capital Journal. The front page is about the nuclear submarine that is named after Topeka, the USS Topeka. That's a story about how it's in dry dock in Maine undergoing an overhaul. So those are the nuclear front page stories. And I see that there were some stories out of Drudge, the Drudge highlighted today that mentioned nuclear. Oh, just one. It was Dave Barry's review. I saw this over the weekend of 2013. He titled it "The Year of the Zombies," and they've got an illustration showing world leaders looking like zombies. Putin makes a good zombie, doesn't he? Oh my God! Look at that! They even got Dennis Rodman there. Well, anyway, it was the cute mention of nuclear in that review was talking about Obamacare. How the website's working better, except there's still a chance that a person trying to sign up could hit the wrong button and cause a nuclear weapon to be launched against Ecuador. So they still have some bugs in the Affordable Care Act, the so-called Affordable Care Act system, according to columnist Dave Barry. All right, thanks, ladies and gentlemen. Exciting things going on here in North Myrtle Beach, at your home of nuclear.com. I think I'm going to be taking everything down from the nuclear.com website, and you'll be able to see the new, all the old stuff at a new website called nuclearweb.info. And I'm going to turn nuclear.com into a commercial site with low prices on computer goods. Prices so low they will annihilate the competition. I'm working with a dear friend out of California who's I think he's going to start off with Toshiba computers that normally sell for like $1,400. They're laptops. High-end laptops that have been, they may have some cosmetic damage to them, but instead of $1,400, you'd be paying pennies on the dollar for them. So best wishes to the new nuclear.com proprietors. I hope you do annihilate the competition. And those of you who come familiar with nuclear.com, please know that we're migrating all the content over to nuclearweb.info. Thanks. Hope you have a great day, a great rest of the year. and a fantastic week. And those of you in the nuclear biz, make it another safe one. This is Steve Schulin signing off for nuclear.com Daily.